seances, suicides, and enough ghost stories to make Zach Baggins blush. It's the third most haunted city in the United States. Welcome to the Meli LynnLee Variety Show, where today we're talking about Virginia City and the ghosts that I saw there. Subscribe below, and let's get started. If you've watched my channel before, welcome back to all my Nahamo Nation OGs. If you're new here, my name is Meli, and I like to think of myself as a psychic skeptic. I can see, feel, and interact with the spirit world, but I tend to examine things from a more scientific, skeptical approach before jumping to any conclusions. I just got back from a 15-day road trip across 8 states and 4,000 miles of spooky forest and haunted mountains and a whole variety of national parks. I think we went through 7 of them. While on that trip, I had multiple experiences that I'm so excited to make videos for you guys about. Today's episode, however, we're talking about the hauntings of Gold Hill and Virginia City.
Shall we play a game, bitches?
As always, we will start with the history of the place for those of you who don't know it. And also, I love it. The best part about doing these is learning the history of all of these ghost towns. Virginia City is a self-proclaimed ghost town very close to Reno, Nevada, and right on the California-Nevada border. Now, don't let the name Virginia City fool you like it did me. It is indeed in Nevada. You want to be in the video? Sure, you can be in the video. Come here. For those of you who don't know, this is RJ. Nevada City is an entirely separate ghost town, which weirdly enough happens to be in Northern California, which some of you may have remembered from our Winchester episode not too long ago. But while the Winchester house we kind of decided was more hollowed than haunted, Virginia City is anything but. When the California Gold Rush started in 1848, Virginia City was right on the cusp of the gold madness that swept through the area. Miners from all over the country packed their bags, left their families, and moved to Virginia City, trying to strike it big in the gold-filled hills very nearby. But as I make these videos, I'm beginning to realize that where there's gold-filled hills, there's usually trauma. And we all know what happens when trauma and death mix. Either souls get stuck, or spirits get greedy. Among the many famous names to come out of the area, Mark Twain, the seer Ellie Brower, the infamous Julia Burlett, the McKays, none of which are officially buried there, by the way. Though there are some incredible stories that these people left behind, as well as the locals who swear their town is haunted. Of course, they have reason to believe that. Some of these stories we will talk about in the video, but only as they're relevant to my experience. And you know me, I love a good story. First off, we have Julia Burlett. Murdered on the morning of January 20th of 1867, Julia was a favorite lady of many of the town's men and worked in the red light district, to put it as PG as possible. Outraged by her murder, the men of the town demanded that her killer be brought to justice immediately, though there's speculation of if they ever were. Julia was supposedly buried on a little plot of land known as Flowery Hill, though some of the locals tell a different story, which, if true, might be the reason for her potential wandering in her death. The story goes that the undertaker who prepared her body was so absolutely struck by her beauty, as so many men probably were, that he decided that Flowery Hill wasn't good enough for her and decided to keep her for himself. So after filling her casket full of rocks and sand, he basically stole her body, took her home. I don't want to know what he did to her. And then he buried her in the basement. At least that's the story. Whether or not this is true is entirely up for debate. But if it is true, combine that with the traumatic experience of her death, poor girl, and that is a recipe for an unrested soul if ever I've heard one. It would then be possible that her consciousness, as we've talked about before, consciousness can be split from the soul. And her consciousness would then wander about around her home and where she worked on a little street known as D Street.
I'm a cop, remember?
Now, I drove down D Street, and while I didn't happen to see her, I did see these orange and red auras just floating very fluidly down the street, which I found out why later, but we'll talk about that towards the end. Our second story is called the 6 Mile Canyon Treasure. Back in the day, there was a man named Jack Davis who, known by most of the ladies, was known as the gentleman robber, mostly because he was very respectful and gentlemanly towards the women he robbed when he was robbing their stagecoaches. Now, Jack the Robber, along with his fellow robbers, robbed many, many stagecoaches back in the day, and when they did, the story goes that Jack took everything he stole, buried it out in the desert somewhere, and it has never been found to this day. But supposedly, somewhere out in the 6 Mile Canyon, his treasure still lays there, totally abandoned. Though no goods have ever been found, I include the story for one reason and one reason alone. Jack died in a shootout with police after they staged a stagecoach to move through the canyon, and unfortunately shot and killed him, as one of many men to unfortunately die in the area, undone by their own greed. The unfortunate truth is that sometimes our own tendencies, greed, our own demons can be our own doing.
That hurts my feelings. I've been good to you, Dean.
Suicide, though the real numbers are not known, was a very large cause of death for many residents of Virginia City during the gold rush. Be it fueled by love, desperation, passion, or financial instability, the poison of the day was a morphine cocktail overdose. That is not the way I would want to go, but apparently it was very common back in the day. Though plenty of hangings and self-inflicted stabbings were among the methods that people used, there's a lot of speculation that a lot of those might have been cover-ups for murder. Because, don't forget, it's the gold rush. Like, people are trying to make millions of dollars here. It's not that hard to put together that someone, after striking it big, might not have lasted all that long. After all, the greed of gold madness, as I call it, is enough energy to permeate the land and basically bring out entities that don't just feed on the chaos, but actively create it.
You need to mind your own beeswax.
When spiritualism became a popular pastime in the mid-1800s, plenty of seances, countless numbers of seances, were done in the city and are actually still done to this day. Though, if you ask me, seances should be avoided at all costs, along with Ouija boards and table tipping, and basically anything where a bunch of people let a spirit use their energy to communicate. That is a recipe for bad juju. Like, that is... You will not catch me doing that any day of the week because, well, let's just say the angels advise against it. It's very possible that these seances, which, by the way, are known for pulling entities out of the astral darkness, have contributed to the countless deaths in the area. Because when you perform a seance, it allows entities and spirits to form attachments to living people, which allows them to manipulate them basically however they want.
Of course I was manipulating you.
Which, I can't believe I have to say this, but is entirely dangerous. On a happier note, a few different stories from Virginia City talk about ghost animals. There's a dog, there's a tabby cat, which I saw, by the way. I'll tell you about that later. And a red camel. Weirdly, a red camel. Like, I laugh when I say it. Like, the camel by itself would just be funny. But red camels, reportedly with skeleton riders that smile at you as they climb up Mount Davison. While many of these animals are probably pets of former residents, the ghost camels, that story in particular, is very intriguing. There were a handful of two-humped camels that were let loose in the area in the late 1800s, mostly because their owners didn't want to hassle with taking care of them properly. But the skeleton rider part, that gives me serious, like, Ghost Rider vibes, as we know it in, like, modern media. Known by Mexican miners of the area as El Camilo Fantasmal. What a cool name for a Ghost Rider. This smirking apparition has been seen all across the southwestern United States for centuries. Ghost riders have been known as Grim Reaper type of entities, which sometimes warn of death and other times actively take part in reaping the souls of the living. Some cultures even talk about them as a reaper who like races the devil to get to your soul first, and if the devil gets there first, has to like fight them off to ensure the person makes it into heaven.
Kinda always wanted to punch the devil in the face.
But while I didn't see any red camels on this trip, I did see lots of wild horses. And like, I'm a horse girl, so like, horses! And although they weren't necessarily of the ghost variety, they were adorable. I found a book upon arriving home, as well as many other reading materials, that basically told the town's most popular ghost stories. These ones, as well as another few. But my actual experience in the town was way more entertaining for me than any research I did after I got home. So let's talk about that now, you know, before my squirrel brain gets distracted and I start causing trouble. As we pulled into the residential area of Gold Hill, which is just outside of Virginia City, there was a certain old, antique-y feeling to it, similar to what I experienced when I visited the Winchester Mystery House. The difference was that when I entered the Winchester House, the feelings of the energy there were practically non-existent. Ergo, I deemed it a hollowed location. But in Gold Hill, the very first feeling that I got, as did my travel companion, was this feeling of like, we're not alone. Something in the Gold Hill section of town just wasn't right. Like, it felt like something greater was holding the energy down. It was a powerful spiritual energy that I believe is probably responsible for amplifying the energy in the area, but at the time, I wasn't entirely sure where it was coming from. But the seances done in the area might have contributed to the outer edge of the city having this weighed down spiritual energy. But as someone who doesn't do seances, because I think it's just asking for trouble, I can't really say for certain because I've never been a part of one. One of the most famous members of the community, Mark Twain, once said on his opinions of seances and spiritualism, "I am silent on the subject because of necessity. I have friends in both places." Well, as big a fan as I am of Mr. Twain, I must say that I wish he'd said more. People who experience the truth, or at least the truth that not many people get to experience, are few and far between, which is why I'm making these videos. In other words, in terms of friends in both places, I think mine might be a little more fun than his were.
The king's dead. Long live the queen.
When we passed the sign that specified we were officially in Virginia City, my three friends were very on alert. The energy there wasn't necessarily dangerous, but they never take any chances when it comes to my well-being. The main strip of town has a ton of energy, like a ton. A weird amount, actually. I was expecting it to be very drained, but it wasn't. There was so much energy that it was just all over. And it was good energy. Like, it was really welcoming. Like, I didn't feel anything bad in like the touristy parts of town. Actually, I was genuinely surprised by how much good energy there really was. Usually touristy locations are absolutely drained of energy, but whatever this like chaos energy or entity or whatever it was that was there, I knew it had to be something of a cosmic level. We walked down the entire walkway. We walked right past the Washoe Club. We walked by Bonanza Cattle Company and all of the like reportedly haunted locations, but nothing was drawing me in. Like, I was looking for like a source. I was looking for something that was like the source of everything else. Everyone was so friendly. Like, I even got a free root beer candy and like had like a moment of childhood nostalgia, but I didn't feel any energies that felt dangerous at first. I saw the tabby ghost cat laying in the doorway of like a saloon kind of building. And there was plenty of echoes and like energies and auras just all over town. Like, it's so brightly colored and just gorgeous. Most of this energy was probably from the people who lived there or the people who currently live there. Like, there's a lot of really good, welcoming energy. But there was one area that did keep kind of drawing me towards it. It felt nothing like anywhere else in town. As I mentioned before, kind of over by D Street. there were these orange and red auras just all over the place, just kind of making their way down the hill. I couldn't figure out why. Well, just down from that area was what I will refer to as my focus point of the town. It was the spot that kept drawing me in. Like, I went and took pictures of it 4, 5, 6 times. I kept wanting to go back to that area. I didn't know why. I didn't know anything about the area. I did, however, we drove by it so I could take some up-close pictures, and we checked it out. And so enters St. Mary's in the Mountains. St. Mary's in the Mountains is the oldest active Catholic church in Nevada. It was absolutely beautiful, and the energy from it was so powerful. I was so drawn to it. We probably were there taking, 100 pictures of just the outside. I didn't get the opportunity to go in because it's an active church and I didn't want to be, rude or interrupt anyone. But the energy was so powerful that even after we left, after the sketchy vibes of Reno, which, I'm sorry, big cities sketch me out, I still couldn't quit thinking about that church. The red and orange auras that bounced around it were very beautiful, but they were very powerful and kind of scary. Like, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know where they were coming from, but they were very powerful, very intense, and very hot. And so I was like, okay, whatever this is the thing. This is the thing I've been looking for. This is the focal point. This is the powerful energy. Okay, what the heck is it? I don't know what it is. It was so powerful in that one area that the energy from the church drowned out everything else. All the echoes of the miners, everything up on Main Street, everything over on D Street. The red and orange that flowed down the hill and around the church. That was what caught my attention the most. I had to know what the deal was about this church. And as soon as I got back into cell service, I Googled it. And what I found blew my mind. October 26th, 1875. In a boarding house just up the hill from the church, a kerosene lamp gets tipped over during a fist fight, and basically the wind picks up and the flames rush down the hill. Thousands of people lose their homes, and that entire side of town is scorched. Unfortunately, so is the original church building. Scared that his mines will succumb to the raging inferno, John Mackay promised the citizens, if they focused their firefighting efforts over to save his mines, that he'd rebuild their church. Big mistake. They agree, the church is burned down, and from the ashes, the only thing that remains is the silver bell from the church. That silver bell in 1877 is put back in the new church because John kept his promise. He rebuilt the church. And when they put that silver bell inside the new church, that unleashed a curse upon the land like you cannot even imagine. Choosing to save the mines instead of the people's church, be it out of greed or just self-interest, unleashed a curse over the land that is active there to this day. To quote the strongest of my 3 angels, who is very consistent and giving me good advice, you don't break a curse. You get out of its way. Because the cosmic that's been created is beyond what humans can control. There is a cosmic entity of greed that's been born in those hills. There's a consciousness that man created and now can no longer control. It may prey on the weak, the broken, the lonely, but it preys on people who unfortunately perish at its feet. Virginia City is indeed haunted by much, much more than just the ghost of the city's past, but by the collective energy that consumed them in their final days, and may have even cost them their eternal souls. But, of course, who am I to decide what a soul is worth? After all, I'm just a storyteller. And the man with the gold makes the rules. But in this case, a man with a soul may confuse his potential riches for happiness in the long run, and give away the one thing he can never take back. Whatever the case may be, it's not dangerous to someone with no greed in their heart. But even the tiniest bit of greed is enough for an entity to latch onto, and then ride out of the hills like a skeleton on a camel. If you plan on visiting Virginia City, like I certainly plan to again someday, it was amazing, I suggest you take a cross with you, and stay out of trouble. Don't be doing seances and disrespecting the spirits that live there, or you might just end up another lost soul, downing a shot of morphine, or hanging on the bad end of a rope.
Be careful what you wish for.
Virginia City is going down as one of my prime examples going forward in these videos as a truly haunted location. I highly recommend visiting it at least once. It's a gorgeous place and it's absolutely incredible. Even with all the people who visit there every year, the mountains and the vast natural landscape absorbs all the energy in a very push and pull, absorb and expel kind of way. So as long as there's people there, there's always going to be energy there, which is incredibly reassuring for someone like me who is very skeptical, but at the same time has psychic abilities. I think the best kind of mystics and psychics are not the ones that always have the answers, but the ones who even question their own experiences from time to time. There's this term known as solipsism, which is the opposite concept of realism, which is the philosophy that only the mind and spirit exist and that all of our perceptions can't actually be proven. Well, at least according to Google. By this logic, the only thing you can really trust is your own experiences. Of course, I'm not a solipsist. Realism is so much more convenient. But to say that seeing is believing, or more so, I'll believe it when I see it, that's just not good enough for me. I think I prefer I'll believe it when I dream it. Because, like Mark Twain said, life itself is only a vision, a dream. Nothing exists save empty space and you are but a thought. Among my new episodes going forward, we're going to have a little more than just a few haunted locations. We're going to have some zodiac stuff. We're going to have some entities and specific videos about certain kinds of creatures. And basically a whole array of multiple different topics, mostly just because I am fascinated by everything that the world has to offer. So if you have a specific question or a specific video you want me to make, leave it in the comments because I read them all. So I'll make a video based on what you guys want to see. And if you have questions, I'll answer them. If you watch my shorts consistently, you've probably seen the hashtag Nahamo in pretty much all of them. Nahamo is the language that I created for my book series and describes a person who is peaceful but dangerous, who is compassionate but sparingly, who is humble but confident, and who is skeptical but still very curious about the mystical side of the world that we all experience without even knowing it. I call my subs and my YouTube fam my Nahamo Nation, because if you're watching me, there's probably something inside you that makes you very curious about the world as well. So to all my lovely subs, thank you to my Nahamo Nation. And if you haven't already, subscribe below if you would like to see more episodes in the future. I'll put my little Cash App thing down there in case you want to help support the channel. And until next time, Naidoken Nahamo. See you in the stars.